6:30. The chair will accept a motion to go into executive session pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, namely Town of Lunenburg versus Settler Solar et al., Worcester Superior Court docket number 1785 CV 01959-D, and Settler Solar LLC et al. Versus Town of Lunenburg et al., Land Court docket number 17 miscellaneous 00690 HPS, where an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's litigating position of the town. The chair so declares.
So moved to return to regular session afterwards.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Ms. McQuaid?
Aye.
Ms. Adams?
Aye.
And aye for me. We will return after we finish this session. Okay. So So we do have 7 PM Pledge of Allegiance. We ought to just do that now.
Yeah.
Do Pledge of Allegiance. There we go. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Any public comment from the board?
Nope.
Any public comment from the public? Since there's no public. Announcements?
I have one. So we received word yesterday for an invitation for a Green Communities competitive grant announcement for this Friday.
Sorry for being late.
It's okay, we're very efficient. We've gone through executive session already, and we're doing announcements right now.
So I was just saying, I received a email from the state last night about that we're invited to a Green Communities Grant Award announcement on Friday. This is regarding our Green Communities competitive grant application that was submitted this year, and we don't know the exact amount of the grant award until they make that press release at that meeting, but that will be this Friday, and the Lieutenant Governor will be there, as well as the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Matthew Beaton, and DOER Commissioner Judith Judson. And it will be at the Robert DeLeo Senior Center at 35 Harvard Street in Winthrop at 1:45 on Friday.
Oh,
If anyone
cool.
wants to attend, if you can let me know by Thursday by noon.
This Friday. Are you going?
It's on this Friday. No, I cannot attend, but John Londa may be able to go to town. He's done a lot of work for
Oh, cool.
the Green Communities.
Well, you're going to be sending us that email?
I can send you the information, yes, yep. And just so the award will be up to what we submitted, so our application was $212,367.
That's
And
great.
you don't know how much you'll get of that?
They won't tell us until Friday. I asked.
Yeah, right. Oh, well, congratulations.
That's
great news.
great news.
Great news.
We can go over, we have minutes from June 19th, which were sent out last Tuesday. We have accounts payable warrant for $6,534.52. And accounts payable for $144,460.88. And accounts payable in the amount of $1,328,455.83.
Are we back on? Just because I don't see the little T.
She did,
Yeah, I did tell
We
them.
are,
Yep.
okay.
we did public comment before you came in. Did you have any public comment for the board?
Nope,
No,
but
okay.
thanks for asking.
Yep.
Okay.
So we will go to appointments. You want to
Sure.
key us?
Requesting the board ratify the appointments they've submitted for the acting police lieutenant, Tom Gamble, and for the acting police sergeant, Joshua Toshi. And I'll let the police chief speak regarding these appointments.
And we have some
Yep.
guests relating to the,
Yes, okay.
So what are we going to do with Sean's road?
Yes, in your, the letter that the chief submitted was also Sean Zarate for acting sergeant. That will occur next Tuesday. It wasn't, so, but he's here as well tonight. It's
okay,
it's a pending
great.
appointment.
Chief, if you can use the microphone as much as possible.
Oh, yeah, sure. Can we just wait one
Yeah,
more
we can.
minute? Tom's
Yep.
on his way up.
Just letting other people know, we do have a policy workshop tonight, and my concept of the policy workshop is that since we have a new member of the board, since we did the last adoption of policies, and we have some members that weren't involved in adopting some of the policies, that it's my theory that we should read through the policies, doesn't hurt to do it publicly, identify which ones need clarification or work or anything else like that, we footnote it, and then we come back to it at another meeting, and we have open discussion at that time, and we make a determination whether we want to make edits or anything else at that, and we would vote at that at a future time. So tonight is the beginning of the process of reading through the policies. Some way you certainly can say we don't need to read that one's not as big as something else, or we already know we're going to be talking about social media, so we won't go through that tonight, but we'll just say that's something we're going to be discussing in the future.
So I read through them twice over the last couple of days and made some notes. So we're not going to discuss anything, we're just going to flag what we're going to?
If you've got specific suggestions for what you want to do without wordsmithing, typographical areas, we can do that separately.
Yeah,
But if you've got
right.
recommended changes, we can note that, maybe have a little discussion, and then put it on the back burner for a future time when all 5 of us are here.
Okay, great.
Great. But thank you for doing your work. Chief?
All set. Okay, so, let me just, the easiest way to do this is read this to you. Lieutenant Mike Luth was chosen as the top candidate for the chief of police position with the Groton Police Department and accepted the position. He resigned his commission effective last Friday. Started Monday on his new job. That created 3 vacancies within the department. So to fill one of the vacancies caused by Lieutenant Luce's resignation, I'm requesting that Sergeant Thomas Gamble be elevated to the rank of acting lieutenant. Sergeant Gamble's been a law enforcement officer for 28 years, attended Curry College, earned a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Criminal Justice Administration. Began his career in law enforcement with the Honolulu Police Department, then moving closer to home, taking a position with the Pepperell Police Department, and then later hired by the Lunenburg Police Department, where he served for 18 years, 16 of which as a sergeant. During the last several years, Tom's been assigned as the day shift supervisor, where he's required to take on numerous administrative duties. Tom's work on days has been invaluable. With his educational background and work experience, I believe Tom's extremely well qualified for the position of lieutenant.
So why don't we take those in place, because we need to do that before you read the next paragraph.
Oh, okay. Oh, right.
So my question, this is the position that, you said it created 3 vacancies, which sounds funny because one person left.
Right. Isn't that funny?
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you a math teacher or?
I was,
Oh.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think I can explain that further down.
Okay.
Without
So,
breaking any
so
rules.
the acting lieutenant, this was specifically what Lieutenant Luth did, right?
Right,
He's-
so,
He's assuming the position of lieutenant.
yeah, the job was posted, we have to by contract post the job for 30 days. Once the 30 days is up, then we'll be back here looking for a permanent appointment. That may happen within a week or so. It's just that I have to comply with, the collective bargaining agreement with respect to the promotions. So, at any rate.
So is there a motion to approve the acting lieutenant appointment of Sergeant Gamble?
Yes, I move we approve the recommendation of acting police lieutenant to Thomas Gamble.
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So that now creates,
Okay, now, moving on. So, now that we're moving Tom up to lieutenant, leaves a sergeant's vacancy. In that instance, I'd request that Officer Josh Tossi be elevated to the rank of acting day shift sergeant. Officer Tossi has been with the Lunenburg Police Department since 2004, served as a reserve intermittent officer until he was appointed full-time in 2012, worked as a reserve patrolman with the Townsend Police Department and was a campus police officer for Fitchburg State University. Been assigned to traffic canine since 2015. Among the numerous other field training schools, Josh has undergone extensive training in the handling of a police canine, which requires an enormous amount of leadership skills. He also been trained in traffic accident investigation, and with Josh, I believe, again, that he's well qualified to serve as an acting sergeant, and I recommend him for that day shift sergeant position.
I move we appoint Joshua Tashi as the acting police sergeant as recommended.
There's
Second?
discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great.
So, Sean's rate would be the third appointment I'm asking you to make, and I understand that there was a problem with the agenda, so I would appreciate if maybe you can vote on that next week, but I'd like to talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
And, ask that I might not make him come up here next Tuesday night if possible. But he is here today, he's in the audience with his family. Sean's right there, family over there. So anyways, let me just see if I can explain that, Phyllis, because you asked that question. Okay, so a recent personnel issue resulted in the sergeant's vacancy. That's as far as I'll have to go with that, okay? For that vacancy, I'd like to recommend promoting Officer Sean Zarate to the position of acting sergeant. Sean served as a reserve intermittent officer with the Lunenburg Police Department from 2008 to 2011, when he was appointed full-time as a patrol officer. Prior to his employment with Lunenburg, Sean served as a reserve intermittent officer for the town of Ashby, and he worked for Fitchburg State University as a campus police officer as well. He was employed by the city of Fitchburg as the parking control officer. Sean's has been working under the detective sergeant as a community outreach officer for approximately 2 years. He was assigned to Lunenburg Public Schools as the first school resource officer this past year, which resulted in remarkable success. And Sean, again, too, is highly trained. He's a highly trained police officer in the area of computer crimes, retail crime, fraud, has extensive training as a school resource officer, and again, shows impressive leadership qualities. And it's because of that that I'm recommending him. And I would say of both the sergeant candidates, that if it comes time to make those appointments, if it turns out only to be one, that would be a real tough choice to make. These two guys are both equally qualified. They both donate and volunteer tons of time to the town. Sean with the school resource and community outreach officer program that we run, and Josh with the K-9 and the traffic responsibilities, and some other things that they volunteer for around the building. So going to be a very tough choice if it comes down to one of them in the future. But for now, I'd like them both as acting, and I respectfully ask that you act on Sean's appointment next Tuesday if possible.
We will do that next week. Nothing personal, it just didn't get on the agenda, so I'm certainly sure that we will be taking that positive action.
And he won't need to be here.
No.
You won't need to come back again.
Yeah, just, okay, that's good. And just evidence of his good character, when I told him that this morning, we had already assigned him to the 11 to 7 shift, now he's worked days, never worked nights in his career. He just he came on at the right time, always worked days. So he's, graciously just gonna stay on that shift till next week anyway. And again, we need the leadership skills on the 11, so we have no supervisors on 2 shifts, so that's a huge help for me, but that just shows his character. Without hesitation, offered to do that. So, anyway.
In light of everything that went on in Weymouth, I think that it's very appropriate that we make these appointments today and the one we will make next week, and thank you all for your service.
Well, thank you. All right.
Okay.
like a picture?
So that brings us to our policies.
Gripping reading.
Gripping reading, that helps you sleep at night. So I guess I won't necessarily read each paragraph, but go through some of the language, and if anyone has any comments on it, let's note
So,
that.
are we going to use the procedures manual or the one with edits?
The one with edits or my comments, so whichever you prefer.
Why don't we do the one with edits so that we've got that set there? So Article 1, procedural policies and purpose. So Section 1 is the purpose of this, to address topics that can't be dealt with elsewhere, supplemental and subordinate to language in state statute, town charter, and bylaw.
You know,
Ideally, it should be consistent with. Go ahead.
There's a lot of topics that are elsewhere, you know, like the personnel stuff. So there's a lot of redundancy, I think.
So that'll be an important part, because there's some personnel policy that affect us, and there's a personnel policy that affects employees. So I would ask you to call that out, saying that will be in two places, because there are some things in two places, like social media policy is in two places, but it's the same policy, pretty much, or?
You'd hope so.
Yeah, right. I mean, it just whether it might be slightly different for an employee, because there actually could be discipline.
But a lot of these things apply to employees specifically. You know,
Okay.
personal leave, there's just a lot of things that seem like they don't fit with Board of Selectmen
Okay.
policies.
So
and
as we
procedures.
come along, point those out at each policy.
Okay, so I just, so it doesn't, it seems contrary to the purpose.
I
Of the
agree, and
procedures.
ultimately, I foresee it would be a separate manual. The personnel policies would be in the employee handbook.
Right,
That
because
would be-
in many cases, I'm going, why is that here?
Yeah.
You know.
They were just all policies the board adopted
You know,
at one point or another.
You know, personal leave policies, just a lot of stuff that I thought, that really doesn't even seem like it's in our wheelhouse.
Well, some of them, they were required to be adopted by us, by state law or something like that, and then they just put in our policies as opposed to adopted and put in a personnel policy. So
Okay.
it did not need a town meeting vote to do it. So, but please point that out every time, and you may have noticed it already.
Okay.
Establishing, section 1.02, establishing policy and procedures. So here's the process. Draft policy and procedure will be placed on the agenda for any regular scheduled meeting. Drafts will be may be in writing, introduced only by a member of the board or town manager. The draft may choose to discuss the policy immediately or schedule the discussion at a future meeting. May schedule any hearings or meeting deemed necessary for discussion. May distribute a draft for comment to appropriate officials as deems necessary. Then we have the policy, the board will not vote on a policy at the same meeting that it's first introduced. It can be waived if majority votes the prompt necessary as action. That would probably be an emergency policy, is the only way I
Right.
think that.
Yeah, right, because I would think that you'd just as soon have a week to reflect on it before you vote.
A unanimous vote of a 3-member board or 4 votes of a 5-member board is necessary for adoption. So this is sort of a supermajority requirement. Tends to be more likely to be followed. So town manager is responsible for maintaining and updating the policy, and available at the selectman's office and the town clerk. Is this also filed with the rules and regulations in the code with other policies?
No, there is only one in the code. It's the remote participation. I noticed that as well.
And that's fairly new, right? The remote participation is fairly new.
I think it was 2013, if I can remember.
So we ought to think about where this should be posted, because these are policies, these are not regulations. So, okay. Then authority, it basically states we get it from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the charter and the bylaw. 1.04, authority of the town manager. So the town manager is appointed by the selectmen, and then it refers to the charter. Maintain a close working relationship. That's a good policy to have. 1.05, duties and responsibilities, standards of conduct. A member of the board shall recognize that his or her primary role is to set policy with responsibility for administration delegated to town manager. Member of a team, be informed, representing the entire community. Office is an unselfish public service, that's for sure. In all appointments, avoid political patronage by judging all candidates on merit. Abide by provisions established by the general law as they apply to the municipal officials. And Chapter 28A is, do we know what Chapter 28A is? And it probably wouldn't hurt.
Some of it seems overly, I don't know, school teacher-ish, if I may say so. Treat with respect the rights of all members of the board despite differences of opinion. Duh. I mean, I don't understand that needs to be.
Because
You need to be told.
over the years, there have been members that would not have followed that.
Do you think that writing it down changed that?
Well,
Maybe removing it would be awkward.
well,
It just seems, like, really, I feel like as an adult, I don't need to be told that.
Repealed.
it goes to telling people who shouldn't be told that they need to be told it.
I mean, I don't want to fight about it, but it
Right.
just seems like, really, it feels disrespectful to have to put that down.
Yeah, we
Have
shouldn't
to be told that.
We shouldn't have to do it, but I think that it also goes to, in the event that a member was not acting appropriately, and we chose to have a vote of censure, without a rule to say what you're doing appropriately,
Okay.
that's where I'm coming from, is that in the event we need to do it, I would say we need to have it for there, so,
Then you can point to a violation of the policy.
yeah. I think we need to clarify what Chapter 28A are, and anytime there's a general law, it's always good to explain conflict of interest law, or
Yeah,
open
right.
meeting law.
At least the
that-
name of it.
Yeah.
Right.
That particular law is
Title.
repealed.
Okay,
So,
so,
Right now, it's Office of Child Care Services.
right,
Oh.
it says repealed.
So then we need to make a note to change that.
yeah. Are you keeping notes? Okay. Member of the board endeavor to sound policies, support the administrative chain of command, refuse to act on complaints as an individual outside of administrations, give the town manager full responsibility to discharging his or her decisions, not make statements or promises of how he or she will vote on matters that will come before the board until he or she has had an opportunity to hear the pros and cons of the issue at a board meeting, make decisions only after all facts on a question have been presented and discussed, uphold the intent of executive session and respect the privilege of communication that exists therein, and treat with respect the rights of all members of the board despite differences of opinion.
Well, like make decisions only after all facts on the questions have been presented and discussed. When we voted on the permit fee last week, we didn't discuss, there was no work done to see what other communities charged. There was very little, the vote was taken on very little information. So frankly, seeing this, I think we should revote that particular permitting fee.
I mean, that's a good point. So, I mean, this is why we're reading these, so we all understand how we should be operating. And if there's something that we shouldn't be doing, we can say, our policy says we shouldn't be voting.
For the sake of discussion, someone's interpretation on whether or not all facts are presented could, in and of itself, be up for debate.
Right.
There could be a point where somebody feels all the facts necessary to make a decision are available to them. So I
Yep.
think that gets into a gray area. You
Well,
can't ever define when,
Well, that's why you say it's here, and then that should be not an agenda item, that should be a discussion point, in a point where if a member says, I don't feel I have all the facts, somebody else says, okay, I believe we have this, this, and this, I don't believe we're going to get this and this, and the other one says, I think we can get this, this, and this, as well as this other information, and that would be a discussion. We still can then vote by a majority vote at that point, but at least it'll be a discussion, and saying, do we have all the facts here?
because you couldn't create a scenario where you would deny the ability to make a motion on something based on someone saying there needs to be fact-finding, because you could stall out any ability to make any motion.
Right.
Yeah,
Something like that.
if people agree that we have the information we need, then we have the information we need.
Yep. 1.06, organization. The chairman shall be elected annually for the first annual meeting following the annual town election. The board may remove the chairman at any point. A majority vote can constitute an election. The immediate past chairman shall preside as chairman pro tem until the chairman is elected. If there's no immediate, so this is a succession of office, that type of thing, so. Board to further appoint a vice chairman and clerk under the same provisions. I would just, this is getting into wordsmithing, but I would suggest that last sentence say the board shall further elect a vice chairman and clerk to be consistent with electing the
Yes.
chair.
'Cause
Parallel
you do
language.
elect, right.
1.07, responsibility of officers. The chairman shall preside at all meetings, maintain order in the meeting room, recognize speakers, call for votes, preside over the discussion. Sign official documents require the signature of the chairman, following a vote of the board. Call special meetings of the board in accordance with the open meeting law, prepare meeting agendas with the town manager, represent the board at meetings, conferences, and other gatherings unless otherwise determined by the board or delegated by the chairman. Serve as spokesperson of the board at town meetings and present the board's positions unless otherwise determined by the board or delegated by the chairman. Make liaison assignments as appropriate and assign overview responsibilities for projects and tasks to board members unless otherwise determined by the board. And arrange for the orientation of new members unless otherwise noted. Ensure that the board maintains a legal and open level of communication. Chair shall have the same rights as other members, offer and second motions and resolutions, discuss questions, and vote thereon. Traditionally, chairs don't make motions, but there's nothing to say that they can't.
Oh, okay.
So,
That's good to know.
and in this point, we're making clear that they can actually do that.
Yeah, because usually the chair says, I will entertain a
Yep.
motion, so they just generally just don't.
Vice chair shall act in the place of the chairman. Should the chairman leave office, the vice chairman shall assume the duties until the board elects the new chairman. Clerk shall sign all official documents. And this is technically your duties. With the authorization of the board, be responsible for recording minutes of any portion held in an executive session for which the town manager is not present. So we usually take care of that. 1.08, meeting procedures. The selectman functions only when acting as a board in legally constituted sessions. Functions as a body in all policy decisions required by law. Elected officials responsibility all segments of the community. There should be no restraint in the proper and reasonable exercise of this responsibility. Individual members of the board shall respect their responsibility to other members so the discharge of these duties may be accomplished in an expeditious and productive manner. Extended orations or arbitrary declarations are not conducive to intelligent and factual solutions. Meetings are to be conducted in, hi. You came in for the police appointments? No? Did you?
I wanted to pop in to see what a selectmen's meeting is.
Okay, sure, you're welcome. We're going over selectmen's policies. You're welcome to stay. Meetings to be conducted in accordance with generally accepted rules of parliament procedure and the open meeting law. All meetings shall be held in places accessible to the handicapped. A quorum shall consist of 3 members of the board. As a practical courtesy, action on a critical or controversial matters, the adoption of policy or appointments shall be taken whenever practical when the full board is in attendance. Actions and decisions shall be by motion, second, discussion, and vote. So discussion wasn't in there
It
before?
was not.
So let's assume there's discussion, that's good.
Yeah.
Split votes will be identified by name in meeting minutes. The chair will announce the outcome of each vote taken.
I don't believe that we do that.
In the meeting minutes, when we have a split vote,
You know, I thought I read in open meeting law that if it's not unanimous, you have to do a roll call.
No roll
don't-
call is
you-
executive session.
you don't have to do a roll call, but you do have to record, I can't remember, was it in the charter? The charter requires us to record who voted which way
In the minutes.
in the minutes. So we need to make sure we do that going forward if we haven't
Okay.
done that in the past.
I don't think it's done now.
We've done it on the really controversial ones,
Right.
on ones where somebody didn't vote for something. Yeah, we've done it, I've seen
I wouldn't
some
say we
things
don't do it. Sometimes it might
might miss it.
slip it, but we do it.
Yeah,
Okay,
Maybe not 100% of the time.
we will now.
all right.
Regular meetings of the board shall be held in Joseph F. Bellata Meeting Room as scheduled by the board. Typically, meetings shall be televised on local access cable. Meetings falling on a legal holiday are usually canceled and rescheduled at the discretion of the board. Actually, the open meeting law basically says we can't have a meeting on a legal holiday unless it's an emergency. So I would
Probably
flag,
change that
I would
then.
flag that to change that to.
Also curious that it says where we have to meet when sometimes we've met in other places, like complete street workshops. Does a policy have to designate the location rather than just the criteria of what a good location place would be?
I don't understand what you mean.
I mean,
They said,
So regular meetings shall be held in Joseph F. Bellata, is that that line? Is that what you're questioning?
it doesn't say must, right?
I just don't know why it's defining a location at all.
Just so people can typically
Well-
find us unless we're doing something
Oh.
special.
Although it does say shall, that is mandatory.
Because if you think before town meetings, you don't run here and
Yep.
meet, and then go over to the town meeting, you meet in a
Yep.
collaborative room. So I'm just thinking it's funny that we're defining a location, but not always
Well, that'd be,
applying to it.
that'd be a special meeting before then. It wouldn't be a regular meeting.
True, but then you have to define a regular meeting.
Yeah, yeah,
versus
meetings.
an irregular meeting. I'm just kidding.
Regularly scheduled.
I just don't know if it's necessary, that was all.
Yeah,
just a
right.
thought.
You should just say, you could say will be held as scheduled by the board unless otherwise noted.
Yep, we can come up with something like that.
And I bring it up only too because I also advocate to potentially sometime this year consider having our meeting someplace else.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I know, you bring that up a lot.
So meetings of the board may be convened at the discretion of the chair whenever circumstances require. These will normally be convened to address unfinished business, respond to emergency situations, or to conduct informal working sessions. The board will post notice and record meetings of all minutes as required. That should say as required. Okay. Agenda. The town manager bears primary responsibility for coordinating and planning the agenda. The town manager, in consultation with the chair, shall prepare the agenda, schedule a realistic time period for each appointment, interview, conference, or other scheduled item of business. All items to be considered must be submitted to the Selectman's office by the close of business the Tuesday prior to the scheduled meeting date. Items of an emergency nature that develop after the close of the agenda may be added to the agenda by the chair. The agenda for a regularly scheduled board meeting shall be prepared by the end of the workday on Thursday the week prior. Does that work? Is that,
Posting the agenda,
or just generally that whole
Yes.
paragraph?
yes.
Okay. Remember, well, and then we usually get the agenda, we have to have the agenda posted on Thursday. That's the other reason why we have to get it done, because there's, the town office isn't open on Friday, and it has to be posted 48 hours in advance, so. Members of the board, staff, town manager, or others who prepare background materials for a meeting should have materials available by the close of business the week prior to the scheduled meeting date.
That's confusing, actually.
So that would be, they'd have to be the Tuesday before, and the agenda's not necessarily set.
Business the week prior. Is Is it close of business on the Tuesday or close of business on the Thursday?
Yeah.
Close of
It re-
business on the Thursday.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. the
Make
Thursday,
it more
yeah.
specific.
Yep. If background information is insufficient or complex, any member should feel free to ask for additional time for careful study of an issue or motion. The agenda shall be available to the public and the press. The Selectmen's office shall be posted on the bulletin board in accordance with the Open Meeting Massachusetts general law and posted on the town's website. Copies of minutes of previous minutes and all important correspondence, reports, or other pertinent materials shall be held in the Selectmen's office for inspection by interested parties and the press. With private commercial property-specific requests, the applicant will be required to notify direct butters directly adjacent to the property, including owners of land directly opposite within 300 feet, including the butters of abutters, at least 30 days before the date and time of the meeting. The request will be discussed or acted upon in the board.
You probably don't need notify direct abutters, because then you go on to explain what the abutters are, who the abutters are.
This language parallels what planning board and ZBA
Right.
has, so we ought to make sure that we're consistent with that.
I have a question about the paragraph before. Are we changing the way the agenda has to be posted? You know, can it be on the website and not on the bulletin board, or?
No.
Nothing's changed.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. I thought
So
something
the
had
bulletin,
changed.
the bulletin
Town
board
clerk
is the
would have to-
official place. The website is required by the town bylaw.
Okay.
But if it's not on the website, it's a violation of the bylaw, but it's not a violation of the open meeting law.
Okay.
So we want it both places for the public to know, but
I thought something was changing, so maybe.
It would be at the discretion, well, it will come from the recommendation of the town clerk, who's responsible for that. So if we move to a new format, using My Town Government, such a site as our posting, we'd have to go through that process, which the board would accept, and we'd submit it to the Secretary of State's office.
Okay, so, there is a new process you may adopt, but we haven't done it.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, I
When
knew
the
that
town
there was
clerk's
something.
ready to move in that direction.
Okay, thank you.
So the only question I have on this, private commercial property specific requests. So for instance, Hannaford asking to change hours, did they notify, or when they wanted to sell plants outside, did they have to notify all the abutters in accordance with this? That's what I would say. I think the intent of this was that if we were going to be doing something different, technically renewal of licenses for commercials would fall into this.
So like when there's, like Mickey Shea's exchanging a license and it's on an agenda, does that technically trigger this policy of abutters?
Yeah,
Would
that's,
be notified of the change.
right.
And so that would be,
I-
quite often, there'd be this scenario.
Yeah,
where it would
right.
trigger
Very
this
often.
abutter notification.
And then added expense for
Yeah.
the applicant.
I would say that we need to come back and highlight this one. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing this, because part of what we've been intending to do is to make sure that if there's something substantial and there isn't a notification process, I think with liquor license, do they notify people?
There's certain applications that they have to notify abutters.
Okay.
But not all. And
So-
there's advertising requirements.
So if you could ask Elaine to come up with what notification process is required for some of the things we have to do.
There may be an advantage to doing it if somebody knew there was a change coming and wanted to weigh in.
Yeah.
I mean, so often nobody comes to a public hearing of one item or another, but maybe following this would generate more
Yeah.
input from
So-
the public.
Private, commercial property. Isn't that everything?
Yeah, right.
Oh, and then that would be Shady Point, and so then that would trigger an abutter notification when that's on
It
the
would be an
agenda.
entertainment license, it would be Stillman's Farm, because that's a private event as opposed, but this is basically saying everything except for the town. So the town doesn't have to notify people, but private people do.
Interestingly.
So I think this is important. This is in
It's
light
got
of
the
our,
implication
We
of
should
the-
clarify
What-
what specific requests require notification.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, maybe it's a lot, but, that's a lot of trouble, too,
Well,
for people.
yeah.
Because in theory, being on the agenda is a notification. in its
So-
most simplest form.
The other thing is the applicant will be required to notify. It doesn't say they have to do a certified mail. They don't have, they could do a simple postcard or other things like that. So we aren't clear, I called them up, what do they have on that part? So I think this is a good thing for the purpose of communication of when we're going to actually take action that might affect neighbors. Renewing a Class 2 auto license is not going to affect the neighbors than they've already been affected, so, and we do put that on notice, so but that technically would be covered, and so we may be able to come up with, new requests or something else like that, something that's a change or, so I think we can come up with something different. For all the matters, the town manager will make reasonable attempt to notify all known persons who will be directly affected. Didn't we take this out?
This was changed slightly from last year, I believe. It was kept in.
We'll make a reasonable attempt to notify a person who will be directly affected by the
I
proposed
think it was
discussion.
maybe reasonable.
Reasonable efforts, right, okay. So I think those two sections would be important to go back and review again in light of our communication goal.
Yeah, it's a weird sentence, too. There's
Yep.
Grammatically, there's stuff wrong with it.
Right. So executive session 1.10, where practical, executive sessions should be scheduled at the end of the open meeting. Only items clearly allowed on the open meeting shall be included. Prior to calling the meeting, the chair shall state the reasons, state whether we'll reconvene an open session. A majority of the members present and voting must vote to enter executive session by roll call vote. I don't know if we need, part of the reason we'd have where practical there at the end of the meeting is so that the public is not inconvenienced at the beginning of the meeting.
Right.
So I think that's fine to keep it there.
Yeah, I think so, too.
We have them earlier when it's not
If
practical,
you have them at 6:30, then
Yeah.
that doesn't
as long as it doesn't
disadvantage.
delay the other part.
Mhm.
Public comment, 1.11. In recognizing both represents and is accountable to the residents, the policy board make every effort to strengthen communications with citizens. The board will act to increase citizen participation, encourage citizen input into government decision, to keep residents informed. To the end, the board will take the following steps. Public comment will be limited to 15 minutes with no more than 3 minutes allowed per speaker at the discretion of the chair. And the current chair and previous chairs have not directly enforced that, unless somebody's repeating themselves. In addition to public comment, a resident or group of residents may request a meeting with the board by contacting the Selectman's office stating precisely the reason for the appearance and the board action desired and by naming a spokesman for the group. As the circumstances permit, such a meeting will be incorporated into the agenda of the next regularly scheduled meeting. Participants will be allowed to make a reasonable presentation through the spokesman and to express opinions, to ask for pertinent information. Residents making such presentations are encouraged to prepare written materials for the board review. If the board is considering matters of citizens' concern at a regular meeting, the public will be allowed to ask questions or make statements relative to the matter under the consideration of the discretion of the chair. The town manager board will ensure all citizen questions and complaints are answered promptly by the appropriate body. Matters requiring attention of the full board will be included in the agenda of future board meeting. Town meeting, annual town meeting held the first Saturday in May per town bylaw. The deadline for filing articles is 42 days before the meeting. Town meeting convened and conducted in accordance with Article 1 of the general bylaws and of the charter. Designer selection procedures. So this section, is this a policy that we have to have under our procurement?
Yes.
Okay. So I think just, this doesn't feel like it's in the right place, and it's almost like board-adopted policy regarding procurement might be a way to organize it.
Yeah, right, if it had a different title.
Yeah, because,
Perhaps.
I mean, I think that as we go through the different sections, so designer selection process procedures govern the selection of designers for any municipal or local public agency, public building project subject to the state designer selection law. And then it goes to what we're doing. Town manager has the authority to conduct the selection process. For the town of Lunenburg as the awarding authority. The approving body may delegate any duties described herein as such is permissible.
How much
So-
of this section is state law and how much of it is proprietary to us?
It comes from DCAM.
Okay.
Don't ask me to repeat. But they put out a template procedure, and that's where it comes from. But we have to adopt one
Yeah.
as a town.
So I would say, I'm not going to read through the entire thing on this one. I think it would be good for us to have an additional discussion on this, let alone formatting of where it ought to go within the policy. Because I think there are other procurement policies that you're working on that
Yes.
may be appropriate to be incorporated in this or do something else with that.
In my previous town, we had a administrative and financial policies manual, and it was pretty much circulated internally because it talked about how you submit timesheets and payroll and warrants and all processes and procedures that department heads and everyone could be familiar with. It's circulated amongst. So it may be more applicable.
So it may not be needed in this
Right,
policy
maybe.
manual.
It would still be
More relevant for
a policy we adopt, but we put it someplace else.
Right.
Okay. I'm just going to keep going on. Anytime I go too fast, tell me. So operational policies, 2.01, access to town council. All requests for the use of town council must be submitted in writing or verbally to town manager. Town manager will henceforth act as the contact point between town council and the government body unless an alternate contact person is designated by the town manager. Information requested, the request or question, what data response is needed by, what type of response is needed, what information you may feel is necessary. Town manager will log the request, respond as necessary. Emergency situations, should they arise, will be handled by contacting town council directly, then immediately notifying town manager the subject matter is request. When a government body is aware that litigation is probable or imminent, the town manager and board of selectmen shall be notified immediately, then be scheduled with all parties to review strategy, risk assessment, and cost limitations. I think we need to add in language to this section about the monthly
Town council
town
hours,
council
right.
hours.
Right, because it,
Because we came up with how that was done, because then that's sort of an expansion on this, that you've got the and
right, because it's not true that all requests for use of town council.
Right.
It's no longer true, so.
It's
we need to
all requests
incorporate-
for the billable use, as opposed to the free use.
Yeah, right, yes, right.
Right. Because that's where this came from, is that there was.
Oh, right,
you know,
right. I
past-
understand why it was put in here to begin with, but it should be altered
Yep.
to reflect what's happening now.
2.02, remote participation. So this is, the town allows, the selectmen voted to authorize remote participation and allowing members of appointed or elected boards to participate in a open meeting as long as there is a quorum available at the regular meeting. There's the procedures for remote participation that they have to be clearly audible to each other, and if it's televised, the member participating will be audible to the television viewing audience. Access to the materials used that are being used at the meeting location. Reasons, ideally it would be infrequent instead of permanent. Personal illness, personal disability, emergency, military service, or significant geographic distance. I know one library trustee often Skypes in from China, so that's a way to handle it. Ways to participate, TTY service, video relay, telephone, internet, satellite-enabled audio or video conferencing, any other technology that enables the remote participant to be clearly audible to each other. It's not required to be visible to each other, but audible is the requirement under state law. If it's video technology, then the participant should be visible to all persons. So if you use Skype or something similar to that, that has to be available to everybody to see that person. If technical difficulties, the chair can terminate the participation. Then there are procedures to make sure it happens. It's announced to the public. They can vote and be counted as present. You have to have a roll call vote, though. So therefore, everybody understands. Our policy states that remote participation shall not be allowed when the town board is participating in an executive session. I believe we have the ability to allow it for executive session, because I think when we were at a training, they said if you do it, you have to make sure that the person is certifying that nobody else is in the room with them doing it from their end. But I think the theory was that we wouldn't want to have that here. Comments on this?
Well, when I look at 9, I wonder if we get that report.
Requirement to have a report. We probably don't. The chair of any committee for which a request is received shall provide to the Board of Selectmen no longer than December 31st a report that indicates the dates of meetings, participation, the names, summary of any logical, technical, and compliance issues. So we probably ought to,
Happens so infrequently. I mean, I think
Not
I've
really
seen,
with conservation.
conservation, libraries are fairly regular. We had Paula here a few times.
yeah, I think she's the only one I've seen do it. It was like,
Yeah,
Well, on this board,
Yeah.
Carl did it when he was working on the sewer commission.
yep,
What's
All
the
of us
reasoning
remote
for
during
having
the
it?
planning board appointment.
that's right.
And it's, I also wonder about 10, where it says, under no circumstances may a member participate remotely in more than 10% of the meetings on an annual basis.
So what we ought to do, my suggestion then, is that we send a message to everybody, to all boards, and ask them, what's been your experience? The policy states that it's 10% on an annual basis. Is that an issue? Let's ask that question.
Okay.
I guess the question is, would you want 100%?
No, you wouldn't want
So
100%,
I
but
think-
10%.
10% seems low.
10%
Right.
is low, and I feel like the circumstance if somebody's hospitalized for, say, 3 months and they want to continue participating, what percent is that, and what would or would not trigger the
And if you-
removal of their participation?
Right. It seems arbitrarily low. It's like a number, they just picked a number.
Yeah, I think I remember when this was adopted and there was concern, but they said, let's try it. They didn't go back and let's see what's going on, so. What would be good is to find out under the state law, are we required to have that report, or is that a recommended report? Because if there's no issues, we could drop number 9 as far as the
Yeah,
requirement.
but what's the goal?
The goal, the goal would be saying, have you had meetings and are there then technical issues? And so,
Or in certain circumstances, maybe people could potentially meet. Sometimes you hear, oh, we don't meet because we can't make our quorum.
right.
Well, if they knew this was available
But
once
no.
in a while.
But you have to have a
You
quorum.
still have to have a quorum
Oh,
to
Quorum
meet
has to be
first,
present.
and then the remote. That's a state law.
Okay.
That's a requirement of the
Yep.
state law.
okay,
can't just have a Google Hangout with nobody in
right?
the room.
That's right.
Not very
Although-
open in public.
That's
No.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. So, okay. So, use of information technology resources policy for appointed and elected board and committee members.
Long title.
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't want to make that an acronym. Policy of the town of Lunenburg to ensure effective business among all individuals, in particular town. It's important. All forms of communication, verbal, written, or transmitted via the towns promote an atmosphere of professionalism, courtesy, and respect. All communications regarding town procedure or administration or which may affect the town or its personnel as a whole will either originate from or be approved by the town prior to distribution, which is the town of Lunenburg. No individual in the town is to send or distribute any communication to all personnel, all users, without prior authorization from the town.
And it just says from the town, so should it be more specific? Who's that?
Yeah.
No
So-
individual in the town is to send or distribute.
But what
No
the-
individual, like,
So it goes, if you go up to policy, it's the policy of the town of Lunenburg, and then it says the town. So every time town is later, it's the town of Lunenburg.
Yeah, I know, the
So,
town of Lunenburg.
but it should be the Board of Selectmen or the town manager.
Exactly.
The town, that type of thing. But for instance, the pancake breakfast goes out. Is that pre-approved? That would be one of the things that,
Right.
Like when it says no individual, that's so vague, so if the superintendent sends things out through the school, I don't know, that's not technically the town.
well, no, it'd be any individual in the town,
Send or distribute, communicate to
all personnel or
all
your users. What's been your experience?
Typically, the town-wide and district-wide email and listservs are distributed through our office or the superintendent's office.
Okay.
And
Let-
Not
let's-
other-
But like the
not other-
pancake breakfast
not other personnel.
just comes from somebody at the senior
Yeah.
center. I mean, that's just an example of sort of a random one.
But like when you say there's the business meetings coming up, is that technically not having been authorized? I mean, I don't think it needs to be.
Right, right.
But if you,
Well, if the town manager is doing it
Then-
and she's authorized,
So let's make it clear that the town manager or the superintendent, I mean, just for school communications, and we ought to verify what they have for a policy. But there are times when, okay, so, say the skate park event was going to be announced, we want to make sure that that gets approved by the town manager or something else, and so that when does it get to the point where it's gone beyond a town thing? Skate park's clearly on a town property, pancake breakfast is on senior. So we've got a road race going on in Fitchburg at St. Bernard's. Okay, you wouldn't want that to come through here unless the town manager has approved it, so.
and even the pancake breakfast is hosted by the Lions Club, so it's not really even officially a
Right.
town. Not that I'm picking on the pancake
right, yeah,
breakfast,
no.
but just trying to,
Be consistent, yeah.
right.
Okay. Town
So
ma-
I guess we want to discuss this a little further.
Yep. Town maintains a bulletin board to designate posted of town notices.
Love that the bulletin board's listed under information technology resource.
Well, even workplace environment is it's just funny things.
Well-
It feels like
Well, the interesting
vegetable
thing
soup, I don't
is
know.
that we actually don't need the bulletin boards because it's not, the bulletin board out in front of the town hall, bulletin boards,
are those the ones, they call it the 4 separate locations around town?
I don't know what this means, because there are other bulletin boards downstairs in town hall, beyond what they post the meeting notices inside, that they post notices on either side of the door, and there's other bulletin boards that, like Mart and other things like get posted, so
Right.
this needs work. And as Damon said, this is the paper bulletin board as opposed to electronic bulletin, because I was thinking, well, do we have an electronic bulletin board? No, we don't.
Is it in the charter where they call it the 4 different locations, one being Hannaford, one is
I think that's the
Center?
charter or the bylaws.
Somewhere, I'm just wondering if the designated bulletin boards are defined as those 4
So
separate bulletin boards.
we need to clarify
now.
that.
And now we have the electronic sign at the high school, which wasn't
Right.
in play when this was created.
Yeah.
So this one
Yeah,
needs.
so right now, this really, that shouldn't even be there because we're talking about electronic. And solicitation, board and committee members are prohibited from soliciting others, including employees during work time, from distributing materials in work areas. Work does not include rest periods. So this
So I
needs to be,
think the policy covers both electronic, like all forms of communication.
this
So the
is-
title, I think, is wrong, because it says,
all right, so it is the
All
title,
forms of
because it's the
communication.
policy of the town of Lunenburg to ensure effective business communications, all forms of communication, whether verbal, written, or transmitted for electronic. So it's the title that's wrong. So then the,
Felt wrong.
that's right, all right.
I suppose it's technology, it's just not high
But
tech.
we still need to do work on the bulletin
Yeah,
board, because what is posting of town notices? Is that meeting notices, or what other town notices are there?
To not even define bulletin boards in terms
Yeah.
of,
And then when it goes into workplace environment, sexual harassment, and it's like, it just feels like they're throwing everything but the kitchen sink in here.
So we can't solicit others, although technically we are for pancake breakfast. But we can talk about what their electronic communication.
I know. At least no one notices.
That's right. We can flip to the other side.
Gotta help communication.
That's right. Electronic communication talks about all the different things there. Town-owned communication, electronic communications be same thought and care. Privacy, no guarantee of privacy for electronic communications regardless of employee. Now, this is where it says, this is where we're starting to get employee versus board, because it says employee is required to use a password or not, because at this point, we're considered employees because we're using the town thing, so we need to clean this up to be one thing for the personnel policy and one thing for the board policies, because clearly anybody who uses the town email it's a public record, so.
Yeah, there's not even, I mean, you wouldn't even say there's no guarantee of privacy, there just plain old isn't privacy. It's
Right,
legally
there's
not
no
allowed.
privacy. Yeah, right, there is no privacy.
Right.
And also, you know, like, the electronic communication stuff is just thrown all over the place in this, and then there's stuff that's not electronic in there
Back
too,
to
so,
paper, yep.
so it would be better organized to have electronic all in one area, and non-electronic in something. It
Yeah.
needs to be better organized.
So I think this whole section is good intended. We just need to make sure it's consistent, what's personnel versus what's policy, and what's paper versus, you know, effective business communication, whether it's paper or whatever.
And if you want anybody to actually be able to use this document, it has to make some sense.
I'm seeing where some of these things came from various policies.
right,
and
right,
they were
right.
put in there and everything, things like that. So I think when we did the last big review, we didn't really hit this because it was good to have, but we were focused on the major policies. Like protected health information, board members generally don't have access, but for instance, there's times when we waive an ambulance bill, it's given to us with the protective health information taken off. So we take an action on the account, but not with any information there. So I think this whole thing could be looked at. Because this is really, it starts out communication, then it's electronic use.
And then it's a primer on how to use a cell phone when you're driving.
Right,
It's
right.
like,
So-
man, could they have fit one more thing in this section?
It probably evolved over time, like it defines that electronic mail is email, so that one goes back.
That's right, yeah. And I think,
There's a lot of work to be done on this one.
yeah,
Yes,
that's right. I
right,
mean, like,
right.
violation of this policy, there's removal of appointed officials under the charter. Basically, you want to have the violation thing at the end covering everything up above, not just this policy.
Right,
Just
right,
the
right.
general
Even
things.
like effective business communication, the last sentence saying that, it's saying that a back and forth discussion is most appropriate for the phone and not email. I think we've gotten to a point where most people most effectively use email and would be, like, might not even get a voicemail for a solid week or so. So calling out email is not a good way to communicate. It's
And we
a little
haven't even mentioned Facebook, so. So, yeah, all right, so I think this one we've identified as, this needs work. I think individually they're okay. I don't think there's anything here that's egregious and not, it's dangerous, but I think clearly,
Hodgepodge.
Right,
Hodgepodge, good word.
And I think if we want this manual to be meaningful and to actually be something someone might consult.
Yep.
It's got to be digestible.
Yes.
well, and a lot of these things really are employee-focused as opposed to us.
Yes.
But at the same time, you know, avoid stressful and emotional communications while driving by pulling over or ending the conversation is true for any of us. If
Yes,
we're going to a
yes.
Mass Municipal Association meeting, we shouldn't be having stressful discussions.
Also, they talk a lot about the devices and not necessarily the programs. So like, it's talking here about personal use of electronic communication devices is prohibited. But now we have things like Google Docs that we are using on our personal devices because it's a program we're using and not, it's focusing all on devices, like everything was in its own space, and now it's all crossing all around.
It's a new world.
Okay.
Needs some work.
And then there's the harassing thing, which seems like that's true regardless of whether it's on electronic versus paper or.
Yeah, right.
Right, and like HIPAA being part of electronic where, I mean, HIPAA even verbally is,
It could be a violation too, right?
So, smoking, it seems like that doesn't need to be in this policy
Might have to
handbook. And I like your note about vehicle use policy, should be in the personnel policies handbook. Only applies to employees.
Yeah, the only reason I would keep smoking within the selectmen's would be, visitors to public buildings, because there's no smoking room.
We may need to have a separate section on that. Is
It
that,
applies for
is
both
that,
employees and,
is that in this section?
it's a
Yeah, it's the next thing.
2.05.
It's the next thing. Or, it's 205.
Okay, so email policy, not exchange, 2.04, not exchange emails between a quorum, collective serial, open meeting law.
I mean, it's kind of, basically, you just could say, you need to abide by the terms of the open meeting law. All this is doing.
We may want to, because we talked about, we're not going to do the training on open meeting law. We want to make sure that we provide the opportunity to, but we need to have that as a separate section, and maybe just say, email needs to follow open meeting law.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I think the fewer words you can use, the more effective the document will be.
Just so we're consistent. So smoking, so it's prohibited by general law.
Right.
We have prohibited in any town-owned vehicle or leased vehicle. Do we have any town-owned vehicles that committee members use?
No.
No. Okay. So we may need to just figure out where, that may need to go into personnel instead of here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what her comment was.
Right. With the exception of leaving the reimbursement. So if there were board or committee members that use their personal vehicle to travel and requested reimbursement, that is part of this policy. So just extracting that reimbursement piece
Okay.
for vehicle
Yep.
use
Okay.
and retitling it
Yeah,
probably.
so you're going to do 2.06 and stuff like that, so. Okay. We're getting through these things. Well, we're on 2. Employee driving records. Assignment of municipal vehicles. Yeah, all this is personnel,
Mhm.
but it's policy that we adopted. Oh, cell phones again. Vehicle accidents. Discipline. And we have forms. I was probably the one who came up with a form. Exemption limitations. So 2.07 appointments.
What page is that on?
35 of 142. Subject to applicable state law and the town charter, the town shall make.
Oh, that's 35, right? Oh, it's not really page 35? Oh, the page is different than what it
Oh,
says
okay,
up
yeah,
here.
I was, the computer page, 35.
Yeah, right.
2.07, appointments. The board shall make its annual appointments at the first regular meeting in June. Sometimes that slips a little. Appointments made at that meeting shall have terms beginning on July 1st and expiring on June 30th. In addition, as the need arises, the board may make appointments throughout the year for terms to make immediate with expiration dates of June 30th. Not exceed 3 years unless specifically allowed. Appointments made on merit, qualification, relate to the duties, committee, or position. Where possible, the board shall seek variety in backgrounds, interests, ages, genders, and geographic areas of residence, so the town boards and committees will reflect a true cross-section of the community. I don't necessarily, I think we do a variety of backgrounds, but I don't necessarily think that we consciously do these things as relate to other members on that committee.
Well, I think we have a dearth of volunteers, so it's
Yeah.
pretty difficult to be picky.
Now, if we had a flood of volunteers, then
Then you would definitely do that.
Follow this policy.
You would definitely do that.
Well, then it does say where
It
possible.
says where possible.
Okay.
I mean, it's a great idea.
Yep. In order to attract qualified persons, vacancies and reappointments will be made public as far in advance of the appointment as practicable. Town manager will ensure the availability of up-to-date talent banks, town hall, and on the website. Ensure that completed banks are maintained organized, easily retrievable manner. It's acknowledged, resident give a sense of the appointment process.
Do we notify that the reappointments are coming up publicly?
I think,
Our office does, or notifies the existing.
right, but I think this is to attract interested people, we will make public in it far in advance. So an article in the Ledger, I'm not saying a legal notice, we don't want to spend the money
Yeah,
on a legal
right.
notice, but some way to say, similar to what the town clerk does, saying the town election's coming up and we have all these positions.
And certainly if somebody's up for reappointment who residents think is doing a bad job, they should know that that person is up for reappointment so they can come voice their concerns.
Right.
And if they're doing a good job, they can come say, great. So I think a process by which, I mean, I don't think we need to change the language, but I think we just need to follow that. Reappointment shall not be considered automatic, but be based on an evaluation of the appointee's past contribution to the board, committee, or position. The town manager asks incumbents whose term expire on June 30th to fill out a modified talent bank regarding their desire for employment and description of the past contributions. They're received by May 1st, a list of appointments and reappointments to be filled by the board.
Doing a little bit of it, but we kind of missed engaging in it.
Right, and I think as Phyllis mentions that we get it, and what do we do with it? I read it and saying, okay, yeah, that makes sense, but I don't think we have a discussion about, especially when somebody says, I think we need to do the following things. Okay, that's good to know as an appointing authority, well, what are we going to do about it? Are we going to talk to the other committee? What do they think about it? Do they disagree? That type of thing. So I think,
Again, you know, what's the goal? So if you're going to ask for it, you should be prepared to do something with it.
And I noticed like one person didn't fill out anything other than their name. So I don't know if that was a point where we'd say like, oh, was there anybody else? Should we
right,
put this one out there and see? I mean,
We have done that.
no, I mean, but
Whole
as
conservation
a,
input.
not as like a choice
Right,
to
yeah.
do it here and there, but as a procedure for every position.
Yeah. I think it would be also good for us to take some time, not necessarily on here, but, and we may incorporate it here. There's some positions that we may not have to have that, so clock winder.
Yeah, right,
What did you
right,
do?
right.
I wound the clock.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes, you're right.
I mean, that one
Although
may,
those were enjoyable to read.
they
some of
were.
them.
Some of them were really exciting for what some of the information they provided, so. But yeah, I think this one, Elaine may have some suggestions for how we might communicate these positions and how we might communicate with the boards about, here's what's come through.
There's so many of them. It makes me feel like thinking of, at the very least, having it all in one visible place, like a chart or a graph, every position that's on a board or committee that is appointed, so you can see it in one place and see sort of the magnitude of it. Because whatever we're applying to it
Yeah.
as a process, if you see how many people you need to implement it for.
Yeah, so that's in the town report, if you go that, which is on the town website, that shows all the elected and all the appointed people, and it shows the term when they'd be coming up.
But is it something we can actually put in front of us?
And so I think Elaine
Yeah, we can-
started that process.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it says, moving down, that the board shall meet with applicants to fill any given board-appointed vacancy or reappointment. This requirement may be waived, but we waived the requirement for everybody this time around. We
Yep.
didn't meet with any of them.
Yeah, we did that, we started meeting with everybody, even for the reappointments. And then I think we got through, we had stability on the board, and we got through that point, we didn't need to do it, but now we've had some turnover in the board, so that might be good to redo that.
Again, you know, these people are taking time out of their lives, they're volunteering to come in and help you, so you don't want to call them in,
just to call them in.
just to call them in.
So
You
I
wanna
think
make sure
it
it's-
should be a dialogue. It should be, what do we, and we should have a discussion before we do it. What is it that we want to ask people who are being appointed? If you think about that, there's sometimes when the person's resume and what they've stated is enough for us to realize this is a good person. Other times we engage in a discussion and try to pull out information. But for somebody being reappointed, we want to ask, all right, how has it been? What do you want to do? What are the things like that? Are we really ready to engage in that discussion and then do something with it?
Right, and further down, it talks about that the Board of Selectmen will get a report from every appointed board annually, and will also meet with every appointed board annually. So when you start thinking about all of the things you probably should be doing, you probably can't do them all. So would it be more important to meet with the whole board? And if you want a report, what's the goal of the report? What are you asking for? It just says a report, So
This past year, the board had a workshop with all the board and committees, and they
just
kind of gave
they were all the
Right.
same one, right?
Yeah, so it kind of accomplished that goal as far as reporting what they're working on, how we could work together towards that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's not a bad way to do it, to find a time when we can meet with them all. Or or have a joint meeting and go to their meeting instead of them having to come to our meeting,
Learning
I mean,
from
it's
them
another
is-
meeting for us, but,
Learning from the board is one thing, but I don't think it's an inconvenience to ask somebody who's on a board who makes decisions, who affects citizens' lives, to show up once every 3 years for an interview to give people to voice their opinion about them. That's why I want to interview these people for reappointment and give the public the opportunity to say something or interview them.
I agree with Damon, like, we're talking about one general communication amongst ourselves and boards and committees, and the specific reappointment and identifying having chosen somebody to represent the town on an important board or committee, and then every 3 years, getting the chance to engage with that person, even just, what if I've never met that person? What if we don't know each other face to face? Once every 3 years is a good time to come back in, check in. How do you like what you're doing? Do you want to keep doing it? Do we want to keep
You
having-
doing it.
Well, and basically, I mean, we've got some really good committees going at the moment, but if you had a dysfunctional committee, our opportunity to change that, other than getting somebody off the committee, which it's sometimes pretty difficult to do, is the reappointment process. That's really our power to change the course of a committee. What would be good on that report is what is the listing that Katie was talking about, the listing of how long the terms, because we do a lot of appointments of one-year terms as opposed to a 3-year. I'm not going to say.
because they're filling in filling in
No,
for
there's
something?
actually a one-year term.
There's
So
some
the
are more
clock
one,
winders are
some-
one-year terms.
Oh,
The conservation are 3-year terms. The
You know-
other, the finance committee is
so
a.
why don't we try to make the clock winders longer?
it
For
may-
example,
it-
you
it
know,
may-
I mean-
And we don't appoint the finance committee.
We don't, but they have that committee's, the term. So I think it'd be good for us to, this would be one of those ones that I think it's always good to look at, is that how do we make appointments? What are we looking for? Let's just go through it again. As a way to think about when we ask people, here's what we're going to be asking you to do.
And I love consistency. I think I mentioned that once in a while. So I wouldn't want
We've
to
been
just,
consistent about that.
I wouldn't want to just pull this up. Like you mentioned, sometimes there's a point where you need to engage.
Yeah.
And if you pull it up and say, well, we can implement this, it's
No.
it looks better if it's something that's always being done, and then you just happen to act at that moment rather than implement it.
One thing I would suggest is that if we are asking people to come into a meeting, we have them like right at the beginning of the agenda, so they're not, sometimes
Agreed.
people sit around and they have to sit through an hour of our meeting, and I just feel terrible when that happens. It feels rude.
Well, I feel like the agendas usually try to put people
They don't
up front,
always.
but
They don't
somebody has to
always.
wait for someone else by nature of a
But
list.
there are ways to, sometimes it's done based on, like, for instance, if we had a liquor license hearing, we would postpone it to the next time. We've already picked that time, and now somebody else wants to get appointed, that may get an issue. But that goes to the scheduling issue. So,
It just feels rude,
Yeah.
make them hang around.
Once every 3 years. And who wouldn't want to stay through a selectmen's meeting?
There you go.
It's a good time.
so the one part that we have, the paragraph says, as board-appointed vacancies occur, the town manager will ensure that local newspapers are advised, that notices are posted to the town bulletin boards and advertised at the town website. Vacancies shall be so advertised for not less than 15 days. So that's not a true advertisement. Newspapers are advised, they're not, it's an advertisement. So the question here becomes, board-appointed vacancies, we need to be clear, is a vacancy when somebody resigns, or is a vacancy also when the term ends?
I think it should be when the term ends. I mean, it specifically mentions somewhere up above, making it public when it's a reappointment.
Although if I thought there was a vacancy, and I'd go, oh gee, I'd like to join that board, and then I find out, well, someone has served in that, and they're seeking reappointment, then I would feel like, well, there really isn't a vacancy.
Well,
There is,
I think we
though.
want there to be the nature that there could
But
be in terms of like a term limit
So this,
concept.
in an English language, there's not a vacancy until the end of the term, and we're making appointments before the end of their term. So technically, there's no vacancy when we're making the appointment, so technically, there would not be a notice here. So I think this needs to be rewritten
Right.
to say, we have these positions that are coming up. The following positions have current incumbents that have stated they want to seek reappointment. Let's put it right out there.
That you shouldn't deter people from volunteering, because
I
we
really
often
agree.
disappoint people because we don't have anyone.
Makes it feel insider if somebody really wants to be on Conservation Commission, but a group wants to be on it for the next 20 years, that group shouldn't feel that they can prohibit other people from engaging with us or showing interest.
Right.
I think that feels,
But at the same time,
Very
I think it's
close.
okay to let the world know that a person who is in there is seeking reappointment.
yes,
That's what I'm saying, is that.
but that they can engage and
Yep.
participate
The
and
the
try to
following
join.
positions will be open on July 1st. The following people are serving, and the following people have sought to be reappointed. We encourage anyone to apply.
And we also have to remember, we don't have people coming out of the woodwork applying for
Maybe
these
this
positions.
is why. Because we
I-
should,
I don't believe-
It goes
It's a
back, it goes both
catch-22.
ways, because there have been some closed committees in the past, we're not as much as we are now, as it's not as the way it is now, that it was a self-selecting committee and nobody ever got in unless they were brought into the fold. We have opened it up to, we're involving the committee, we're the appointing entity, we're involving the committee, the people, other things like that. So I think there have been times when people have felt, I'm never going to get on that committee. And when you've got somebody that's doing a good job and somebody who's new, we have to make that decision, and sometimes we will pick to reappoint the person, so that's a reality.
That's a reality, and it's also respectful if that person has been doing a good job and wants to be reappointed.
But that's focused on them, but if we think we want to go in a different direction, we may want to, on a policy way, go a different direction and still be respectful to them. I still want to be respectful to them, but nobody's reappointment is automatic.
Yes, I agree.
We have that, so I think this section needs to be rewritten in a way that's respectful and gets the appointment process open to the public, that they understand what the reality
there's
is.
no sense in putting a 3-year term to it if the idea is to have somebody keep it as long as they want, because it's disrespectful to change. I mean, I think you want to keep it open and fluid, and if the right person's there, they will be reappointed by the board.
I think it's
So-
important how you communicate that too.
Yep.
Is in your policy and in the form that goes out to all the people that are seeking reappointment, because I agree with Phyllis, they may take,
Exception.
right, to that and say, so how
Thanks a lot.
how it's communicated,
Yep.
I'm
meaning.
not trying to scare people
Yeah.
away, but at some of these boards make very important decisions that affect the public.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and just being a volunteer, somebody who steps forward, you may not be doing a good job, or maybe you're doing a great job, but still, should be up for review, and people should also have the chance to get involved, because I think the roles are too important to just be automatic because you're the only one who volunteered.
Yes, and we have acted in that way.
But I think a consistent review enhances respect, because then you're not going to start implementing something
Right,
just
because it
when
feels
you
weird
need
if you
to,
call
then
into the
Oh, yeah,
principal's
right,
office,
right.
because,
You can't go, well, this one we're gonna,
And we need to say it at the front. You're being appointed for a 3-year term. We hope you do a good job. There's no guarantee you're going to be reappointed, but, so we tell it up front. So I think you're right. We need to come up with appropriate language changes to this, so. I'm more than willing to work with you on this one, and then we can seek out. Some of this stuff was what other towns were doing, so I know that that's been a way of collecting some of the information. All committees appointed by the board shall assure that committee members' agendas and minutes are posted on the town's website in addition to open meeting. In other words, they have to comply with its town bylaws. There's where the part report annually to the selectmen, and that may be technically reporting to us by putting something in the town report. But we don't really review what goes into the town report as selectmen, so that may be something we may want to do. The last thing, a decision to terminate an appointment may be made by a majority of the board, subject to notice and right to be heard in accordance with the town charter, because there's a provision in the town charter. Anything else on that section?
Is it defined in there that sometimes appointments are made in a situation like with the planning board? That's not what it's really talking about
No,
here.
no, on this one, no.
But sometimes I don't know if when you're reading it, it's defining what type of appointment.
well, but,
Maybe it doesn't need to, but sometimes there's an appointment where you're engaging in a process that's been triggered by a different space, like a vacancy on an elected position.
Right, an elected
Two groups
board.
come together, but you're still making appointments, and I don't think it defined the difference anywhere.
well, but it's talking about
So
appointed
at the
boards.
beginning,
It's
kind of talking
talking,
about the annual appointments versus a vacancy.
and it's talking about appointments as opposed to.
no, I'm just saying in general, sometimes when you read it, it's defining things that are happening in
Yeah,
two different
yeah.
spaces without defining specifically what space we're talking about.
But we're talking about appointed boards. That's the space we're talking about, not elected
Certain
boards.
sentences jump out and aren't defining in the moment of which.
But the whole section
It's
is
just
on
a thought,
appoint.
it's not a debate, it's just a little thought of
But what I'm saying is, the section is appointments.
right.
So we can change the title to say appointments to boards and committees under the jurisdiction of the selectmen. I don't want it that long, but
Perfect. 'cause-
appointments to
Yep.
boards and committee, but then there's a planning board.
Yeah, we have elected boards. So I think this is talking about appointed boards.
We might want to have a section at the bottom saying this section does not apply to filling vacancies on elected
On
boards.
elected, yes,
Just-
just
just-
define that somewhere, because when certain sentences come out and
Yep.
they don't apply to these scenarios where the sentence actually sounds like it does.
Well, and sometimes actually people fill out talent bank applications
Yeah, for the planning board.
when we have openings for elected boards. So do we?
Correct,
So we
yes.
use.
I see myself
so we
having gone
use the
through
ta-
this
that-
process
that's
in a
right.
scenario that this section isn't defined for.
That's right. So it's a
That's why we
talent
s-
bank application for an elected position. So we may want to come up with another form.
Right, the
But
reason
just
I
be-
read this
just be-
differently is
yeah.
because I went through the process of an appointment, but it's not what this section
That's
is
right.
for.
Yeah.
And
We-
so
and
it'd
we've
be
used
good
the
to
same
define that.
form both places, so we can clarify that. Okay, then we get the boards. So the financial policies that we adopted, Article 3, financial borrowing, these policies were created by the Finance Committee, brought to the Selectmen. I don't know if we had any comments when we adopted them. These help in our audit. It gives direction for how we're operating on that part. I don't necessarily see these as a problem. Did anyone have any comments on?
I did.
Heather had a couple, so.
In 302,
Capital budget.
is it? It's on actual page 36. Wait a minute,
Okay, that's
full budget.
borrowing emergencies.
Wait a minute.
37.
The total, oh, here it is, in page 34. Wait a minute. Okay. The regular tax levy is the sum of the prior year levy plus the increase allowed by Prop 2.5 plus new growth. I think it should be something more like, plus an increase no greater than that allowed by Prop 2.5.
That's a definition, though, by the Department of Revenue of your tax levy.
It would automatically mean no greater than.
But it doesn't say that.
Right, but the increase allowed by Prop 2.5 cannot be more than what's allowed by Prop 2.5.
Yeah, but it could be less. It says plus the increase allowed by Prop 2.5.
Right, but you would propose saying, but not more than.
Plus an increase no greater than that allowed by Prop 2.5, which is different. This sort of assumes you're always increasing it
Okay.
2.5.
I think that's a good way to phrase the question that you've been raising, and that we
Right.
can put that on the agenda to discuss. So, so that's B4.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else on the first part?
And also, Heather had some notes on 3.3, right?
Yes.
3, which is free cash.
Free cash. So this policy, I believe, because it was adopted or amended in 2014, was prior to the pavement management plan.
Oh, right.
And so includes the section about priorities for applying for free cash, using it towards replacing town roads and signage, which we do through other means. We have increased the
Yeah,
roads
that-
appropriation by 50,000 each year, and
That's right,
have the pavement management
before we had the,
plan.
before we had that policy or the plan to add money and do the override, we said, all right, we want to have a priority. If we get free cash, we're going to put it into the roads. So you're suggesting taking that out and saying instead,
removing that, inserting, adding the special purpose stabilization fund as another prioritized use of free cash, as well as the OPEB trust fund, to reflect what we state in the OPEB trust fund policy.
I think those would be good uses for it.
Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not voting
We're
on
not
anything
voting.
tonight. Yeah.
Notes are there.
But,
that's right.
good suggestions.
Yeah. Stabilization and general reserve fund, do we need to, is that the one we added to have this, do we need to add a special reserve? Or is that it? Special purpose? We have stabilization general reserve fund, are one or more special reserve accounts, so I guess it's probably inherited. 10%.
We haven't established a percentage of using towards special purpose. It's been what we've had available.
Well, if you think that we should put something more in here, just come back with us with a proposed change on that. .05 warrants. Warrants must be available for review and signature by 5:30 on the meeting date. I think that's fine if somebody wants to come in advance of the meeting to review it. Investment policy. So this policy, do you know who did this policy?
Do not, I think it's long and cumbersome, but I don't know if it can be.
I would
Succinct.
I would suggest sending this back to Karen and and Miley for their review. A lot of this follows Department of Revenue requirement because you can't, there are restrictions where you can put town money. And if this policy is a policy that the auditors like, you know, I mean, we may have, I can't remember what the, just organizing our financial policies as one section and that type of thing, so.
So on Part J, legal references, it mentions Massachusetts general law, 3 different sections, so you could say in accordance with Massachusetts general law, these sections, just cite the sections if.
Yeah, the auditors like to see a real policy.
Okay.
You know, financial institutions shall be selected first and foremost with regard to their financial soundness and stability. When I became treasurer in Lexington, we had $1 million CD in a bank that I know was going under, and it's like, oh, this comes due next week, and they said, we want to renew it, and I said, no, we want to turn it to another bank. So that's what they want this, so this, in some ways, this is almost like a procedure as opposed to a policy, but the auditors tend to like them as policies. I'd ask Karen to find out is there a simpler
Yeah, right.
policy that would meet the requirements? And for that matter, is the treasurer following this?
And you would think the auditor would be able to give you some help with that, because it's, we're not the first people who need to come up with something
Right.
like this.
Next section is the OPEB funding policy, which we just adopted in January.
I would like to see some policy where we actually seek reduction in the amount of the OPEB obligation by reducing the OPEB awarded to new hires. I would like to see a concerted effort.
So I think that as a topic is something we need to put on our list. It's, I would say, anything reducing our future liability with OPEB or pension. Just because we've talked about doing that relating to health insurance review for the pension.
Which was an $8 million reduction in our OPEB,
Yep.
like the one we
good.
just did.
Right.
Okay.
Keep our eye on the prize.
But for the funding process, we're okay on that part. Tax title policy and procedure, this was adopted in May of this year.
So hopefully we don't need any work on that.
Right. So here's what we discovered in my work, because we have to do a lot of policies for the federal government for the health center. Because just the title of it, this is a policy and procedure. We should be adopting policy, and the department should be adopting procedure.
Okay.
That's how we can simplify a lot of these different things. So when I went back is that here's how you're going to select your bank. Well, you've got to come up with secure banks. How you select them is the policy. So let's just generally think about all of these policies and take out anything that's a procedure, which we still want to have,
But not here.
but not necessarily here. So let's just think about that, and I'm not saying changing this for the first pass here, because it doesn't hurt to have it all in one place, but,
Well, it kind of does, because it makes the whole document awkward.
for us, right. But for somebody who wants to do a tax tying, it's all in one place.
Oh, right.
So, but what you do is that you come up in the procedure process, you incorporate the policy as an addendum to that. So if you think about the Architectural Preservation District bylaw that the town voted, they then incorporated when they did the regulations, they had the bylaw as an addendum to their regulations. The regulations were not adopted at town meeting. So, just a way to simplify things going forward. Liquor license. I think generally it wouldn't hurt to have a workshop just going over liquor license regulations. We
Well,
talked about,
there was one place,
Well, there's a couple places that,
okay.
let's see, where was it?
Well, and this came up in one of our liquor license things. So
right, that's what I'm referring to, is
the-
some people feel that there might have been
I think it was the lighting,
Oh, this is one thing. It says licensee shall not lock the front door of the premises until the last patron has exited from the premises. Does that mean they can't lock it from the inside or they can't lock it from the outside? Or can you not lock it from either
It can't be locked.
at all? Because I went into an establishment recently and there were people still in there, but the door was locked.
Because they don't want
Because they
anyone
didn't
new-
want anybody else coming in.
No.
And I'm thinking, I think from all of these hearings we've been going through, they're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So I think it might be, in that particular case, specified, inside or, not locked period or something, because maybe they don't know that they can't lock it.
But what are we trying to accomplish with that statement? Why can't they lock it so new people can't come in?
Because the police have to have the ability to come in to see the operation while the people are drinking.
And if it's a safety exit, it probably has to be opened if you have.
Well, for building code and assembly use like that you can't, they all
Assume-
have crash bars.
Yeah,
and
assume
can't
you
lock
can
it.
get out. That'll take care of the public safety. I believe the intent, and this is why we probably should have a workshop on this, is that our liquor license agents, which is the police department, have to have the ability to get into the building when it's all open. And it's open as long as a patron's there.
Okay, if that's what the goal is, then.
But if that's not stated there and it's not clear, we should state it. For the purposes of access, this should not be locked by the patron. What the issue became for one of our liquor license hearings was this a patron, or was it an employee, or was it somebody not a patron, they just were there picking up? So I think we need to clarify some of the language for who's in there, and how do we define that who? And Elaine probably can find what other towns have done on that.
Or like anyone who is not an employee.
Right,
Right.
Like,
That-
so
that-
only employees.
Yeah, yeah.
Because then it went into that gray area.
Yep.
these-
Oh, yeah, but he was the
Doesn't-
ride
Right,
and
right,
yeah.
That he wasn't a patron.
And then again,
Employees only.
we have to, as Damon was just asking, we have to ask, why are we asking that? And it's because we need to make sure there's not anybody in there drinking anymore. So if the ride is okay to be in there, is that okay?
I don't think so, because I think the ride's outside. I used to always get picked up from a train station for safety, and my ride wasn't in my train, it
Yeah.
was in the parking lot.
So, but we should state, some of those things. And the other one was, I'm trying to think about physical premises.
There was something about lighting, right, in one of the hearings recently.
Yeah, it's down to physical.
The premises shall be lighted in all public areas in a manner sufficient for the safety of the patrons and the manner sufficient for all agencies to make observations at the premises without the need to identify them or ask city assistant. That's 1.05 physical premises, section E.
Does that count for when it's closed? You can't shut the lights off when you leave?
Shall conform,
The interior?
I would imagine that you can shut the lights off when it's closed.
in a manner sufficient for the agencies to make observations at the premises without the need to identify them or the need to seek assistance. Well, while they're in business or during their operation, I don't know, we may need to, that's a good question. See what happens when you read these things?
Right, because in that situation where it wasn't well lit, it was closed, and so technically they might have not have been violating
Well,
lighting
there were still people in there in the place though, so were they closed if there's still patrons inside?
or they should have been. So their violation would have only having been not open but not being well lit.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's,
We're learning a lot about this
Yep.
stuff.
Anything else on alcohol?
No, but looks like we have to look at that one too.
Yep. Verification.
The
And
BYOB did, I had a,
Now, what page is it? Oh, 402, right.
let's see,
What's that?
yeah, the-
Ay, 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 what, page 77.
so I think this section does need to be looked at a little more, the BYOB.
okay.
Well, one question I had was it seems to be referring just to restaurants. what about establishments, recreational establishments that don't serve food but allow people to bring liquor?
So this, if this policy is for restaurants operated by common victulars. That's the only place you can have carry-in.
Right, but businesses do allow patrons to bring liquor and food.
The liquor is probably illegal.
Right, so what kind of instance?
Shady Point. It's a recreation. They use recreation.
In other areas that aren't common victulars, would be a one-day liquor license, but
But that's if they're going to sell it.
Yeah,
This
they
is the
don't,
people coming
they're
in.
just
sell it.
bring,
They just-
okay.
So I would say that town council needs to be reviewed as far as, is there a carry-in requirement for other places like that? BYOB. Okay.
We probably won't run into this, but there's brew pubs that are bring your own food.
Right. So, one-day liquor license. You have some proposed changes.
It just, in the title, to identify it, what type of, or you could put it in the text. That's the general law. It's a special license through
Oh.
ABCC.
Which one are you?
4.03.
403. 80, page 80.
Yep.
And this was an action item to add a insurance requirement
Okay.
to this policy. Town council reviewed what I proposed. This replicates section 12 of liquor licensing. It's a minimum liability coverage. I did do a poll of of various towns. People, in general, just say they are required to have liquor liability insurance, no parameters. But I think putting the parameters, the minimum coverage,
Protects the town.
yeah, protects town.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay.
4.04 earth removal permits, which basically just refers to the bylaws. So,
We
And
talked about doing a
we're-
whole workshop on.
yeah, we're going to do a
earth
workshop.
Yeah,
on
because we're
that.
going to sort of remove that from our,
We might remove
wheelhouse
that,
anyway.
and we want to add in requirements for filling in
oh, right.
because of
Mediation.
communities. So the question I have here is, so this is a section on permits and licenses that we issue, so that's why it's here. Is every license that we issue here. Okay.
Including the circus.
Circus permit. Reserve the right to deny a circus permits for cause, including one not limited location, parking, safety, and noise.
Cross that bridge when we get there.
I was going to say, yeah.
I've gone to some great circuses in Lunenburg.
Peddler licenses, public entertainment licenses. So that was a proposed, Adam's working on that. The public entertainment license
Yes.
process, that type of thing, so.
Yes.
So that would be an example of, we may want to adopt a policy, and he may come up with a procedure. But we still have to come up with a policy, too. Public entertainment on a Sunday, auctioneer's license. Automatic amusement device license. It probably should say automatic amusement device,
Yeah.
because we could have automatic amusement. Oh, hey!
No tickling.
That's right. I'll channel Tom Alonso because he always said, can't believe we have licenses that we pay for amusement devices. But that goes back to when they were trying to control gambling.
Yeah, so it drives me nuts too.
Yeah. Jukebox license, bass license, bazaars and raffles, billiards license, Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3, and this all regulates follows state law. Common victular, food service, taxi cab.
Oh, I had a question about taxi cab. Should we consider like Uber and Lyft? I mean, we don't have taxi cabs either, so I don't know if,
I think since you raised it, we should ask MMA to see, or town council, is anybody regulating Uber and Lyft? I mean, because that's why I raised the question on limousine, because taxi cab, you're required to have a query.
right,
In limo,
right.
we have a query of the owner, but now everything is done by phone. For limos, who do you get?
Oh, so the
Do-
drivers aren't quarried.
I don't know, that we need to ask that question. And what do you do queries for, who's going to do queries of Uber and Lyft? So we got to find out what people are doing on that. Gasoline storage, so we issue that permit, the fire chief doesn't?
Where are you?
4.19, page 85, paper, page 89, electronic. Completed
For his
application shall be
recommendation.
forwarded for the recommendation, so.
Are there currently people with gasoline storage license, like who?
There's ones on file, yeah, for existing
So
ones.
the Gulf Station,
Just the gas
gas stations,
Mm-hmm.
or
Or businesses
it could be
that
like
have-
Powell's, or I don't know if they have them or not, but, Proctor's, they could have it.
Some of the farms probably have it.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Okay. I'm surprised that it's with us. We could do a charter change. Use of public buildings, public property, poll locations. If a hearing is required for a poll location, certified abutters list will be obtained from the assessors, and all abutters shall be notified. Did we do that for the last poll location?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Of course, it says certified butters, it doesn't say
Yes.
how close the abutters have to be.
There is a state law
Okay.
that mandates
All right.
the number of feet,
Can we add that in?
the number of feet.
Yeah, because we have it with the other one that has 300
Super
feet.
defined the other
Yeah.
butter situation.
Parallel language here. So it says poll location requests is the title, but if a hearing is required. The word request doesn't feel right.
Yeah, because do they not always need to request it? They probably can't ever just put one, right?
No, they can't.
No, they can't.
They're allowed to replace a broken one, but they have to tell us if they move anything. I don't know, it's not a poll location approval or something, I don't know. Road acceptance, so this follows state law, and there's some procedure in here too. Selectmen reserve to not act or postpone action. What's interesting, it doesn't say the standards for the common convenience and necessity, which is why we lay out roads. So I think we have to have a finding.
Yes, at the hearing, the selectmen may vote to lay out the road. I believe you are required to, if it's going to be voted on at town meeting.
Right.
There has to be a recorded
And I think that,
vote.
but there's also a finding we have to make too. So I would ask town council to look at this, if it's going to be all there.
Yeah, because if it doesn't meet the requirements, you wouldn't accept it, right?
And I would actually say road acceptance or discontinuance. Adam could give you, so for instance, if we decided to discontinue part of Holman Street where the bridge is, we would have to come up with a finding that there is not required for the common convenience and necessity for travelers well, it's not safe, so we've got it blocked off, but the same thing as if we're accepting a new road. So this almost feels like a procedure and not a policy.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And if all we have to do is follow state law, to simplify things, it's not a bad thing to have it there, but if everything we do is in this document, then I'm okay if we're doing some things and not others, so. All right, use of public ways,
So just a question,
Yeah.
when there's a new road like Butterfly Lane, does it come through Selectmen?
Yes.
Okay.
planning board, if it's a subdivision, they get their whole process and get it, assume they make all the requirements there. Planning board makes a recommendation to approve it, comes to the selectmen have to lay it out and approve it, then it goes to town meeting for acceptance. And the
So no new
selectmen,
roads in the last year and a half. I didn't see any road acceptances.
right, yeah,
so
no,
it was
we
new to
haven't
me.
had anything.
Once it meets all the criteria set forth in the planning boards.
Right, and they've
Right,
had,
and-
when I was on the board, one of them didn't meet it in time for town meeting, so they postponed it
Yeah.
for another time, next meeting.
And the fact is, the town can accept a road that does not meet subdivision requirements. In order to do a subdivision to divide land, they have to meet that standard for the planning board. But Hickory Hills roads were developed in the 50s under the subdivision rules that the town had at that time, but they never were accepted by the town. In the 80s, they came to have them all accepted. Well, they didn't meet the current subdivision standards at that time, and we ended up, in fact, at that point, they were gravel roads, and we ended up coming up with,
Remember those?
they came up with, they used to oil them with crankcase oil. It's like, anyways, with the town, I was on the planning board at the time, the town came up with an agreement where we're going to accept these roads over time if you pave them and you give us easements so we can do stormwater into the lake. That type of thing. So, because there wasn't anything on record at that point. So, even though it didn't meet the current subdivision, the town can vote to accept a road. Usually it doesn't if it doesn't meet certain standards. That's why I wanted to have the standards of what does a road need in order to be accepted. It's got common convenience, there's like 5 standards of a road, that type of thing. Adam would be able to tell you on that.
And some of it gets pretty picky too, down to the curbing and whatever, making sure it's in good condition before we accept it.
Use of public ways. No person shall place any tent, table, booth, stall, or anything in a street, highway, sidewalk, or on any public grounds in the town without a license from the selectmen. And this is just a little picky thing on my part. People think they own up to the paved road, but there's a layout of the road that may be greater. So
Right.
that's why technically putting a mailbox next to the road, you're putting it in the town road. And our DPW makes an effort to replace them if they get hit by the plow, but technically it's on the people's risk. But signage on.
But the mailmen like it there.
That's right, that's right, that's right, that's right.
And you can't measure from the center of the road to figure out where the layout of the easement is too, because the road's not always
Really
in the center of the
varies.
public way.
Yeah.
So you really need a surveyor really
To know where
to
your
know where your
property
property line is.
Right.
is. So, 5.04, proposed new section, signage on town property. That came from you?
Was an action item, yeah, and I put this language together. No person shall place any signage, temporary or permanent, on town property without permission from the town. A sign permit must be first obtained by the building commissioner, or I should say through the building commissioner, conforming to the requirements set forth in the Code of Lunenburg zoning, Chapter 250, Section 6.5, and then sent to the town manager for final approval.
Okay, so when sometimes there's like meat bingo signs for fundraisers, those would no longer be allowed on any town spot unless they go
On
through this process.
Public property?
Every
It
once in
would
a while,
just
like
have
by
to
the
go-
gazebo, there's some sort of like charitable sign for like
Yep.
an upcoming raffle or event.
Yeah. That's what this would be covered.
Because there is a bylaw that pertains to temporary ends and it includes signboards as well, so.
Okay. Toll booth.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm just thinking of when there's charitable things and events, and it's easy enough to use private property, but if the town can somehow provide, in addition to this, a process to easily get like the meat bingo advertised or put in a place that's really, anything that goes against communication, I just want to make sure we stop and think about it. So it's really just for things that are
Well,
charitable.
if you think
or
about a
community
sign
needs.
permit, what's the sign permit fee?
Gosh.
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you on that.
Yeah.
But,
Just thinking
but
there's
so,
times
so
where-
would you have
Yeah.
to pay a sign permit fee for every meat bingo sign that you want to put around town? Which we're effectively trying to say, don't put signs on town property, put them on private property, is what we're
On
effectively.
the flip side, people have talked about having banners in town center or different things. When, I agree that people shouldn't just be able to put signs wherever they want on town property, I totally agree. But then to enhance communication of like healthy, good events in town, sometimes there's things like sports camps.
Meat bingo.
Meat bingo, sports camps.
You can put them,
Sometimes there's like a music, sign up for a music aider, like, you see these signs that are like good piece of information lots of times at the gazebo, so while prohibiting those, how do we also say, but we do want this event to be seen in the center of town, and we want to accommodate it
Well-
by having a space that we say, please advertise here, or we will help you advertise here, or come to us, just like with the toll booth, instead of going through a fee in the building, is there a way to say, come through the selectmen, we will approve signs to be placed on the Ritter lawn? Or just as an example.
With that as an example, the skateboard park committee, they came to our office, we helped them, guide them through the process, sent to the building commissioner, what are the size requirements of a sign, where can it be located, and we wanted to make sure it wasn't, because it's between the playground and where the central offices are right now, making sure it's in a good location, making sure dig safe is called.
Sure, that was for like a real sign versus
Right.
these fluid coming and going, like this is happening next week.
well,
type
for
of
example,
signs.
you can ask Lisa Normandin to put a sign at the Ritter. You can ask the school principal to
But
put it on the
with this
electronic
policy, they might
sign.
not be allowed to do it without sending it through
No, with this, they can
would
do those
it
two
at those
things.
places because those are existing signs.
on existing signs. Yeah,
So-
I'm just thinking of helping communication and enhancing awareness of events. Is there a way we can have people say, yes, put your sign here, or we have a place where signs can go, or banner?
Yeah,
Just,
this is directing to the building commissioner, so it'd be interesting to see if he has some policy or form, or if he just does them.
because I see that like meat bingo wouldn't go through this, and then we wouldn't know there was one.
Yeah, this isn't meant to be prohibitive, it's more that, so that anyone putting a sign on town property is conforming with the bylaw, the requirements in the bylaw.
And I agree with it, and I just think if we can come up with a new way to have a space to,
So I would,
Visually
why don't you try to
advertised.
come up with some proposed language? That would be the best thing for what, just English language for what, take a couple of examples and what you would need to
I
say
think
that.
rather than the language, it's giving people a procedure to advertise things in a way that we can assist it visually in town
But
center.
we're going to have to write it into the policy.
Yeah.
So just think about how this would play out because, meat bingo is done by
Lions
Lions
Club.
Club. So they're doing meat and they're doing pancakes. I'm not sure that's healthy eating, even though I eat both. So, but I think it goes to what's the next charity that does it? What is that doing? And where does it go?
And most of these organizations have many members who are willing to put signs on their lawns. I do think town property could become cluttered and unattractive.
That's why I'm thinking if we could find a specific place to, well, people keep talking about banners as a way to advertise events, like you see them in Groton when you're driving through. And
Well, and then the question becomes which ones you do. Farmers market, you see that.
And the problems with banners on, with our roads, where they would be most visible is state roads, so we can't put a banner.
just always
across
trying
state
to, we
roads.
have this goal of communication, and every once in a while, we're going down this path.
But
of-
remember, it's communication with us, not communication for the nonprofits.
And what about town, what if something is like a town entity putting signs on town property? So like public access cable.
No person.
So, yes.
So the
yeah,
fire department's going to have the bonfire again. Yay! They have to follow this process.
to put up a sign for a town event on town property.
So we're holding ourselves responsible to ourselves.
For making it hard to tell people things.
No, there's just a process.
Okay. And would the town pay their own fee, or would we waive the fee for our own
Any
advertisements?
town-related events and everything like those fees are waived for town. Town's not going to pay themselves.
Right.
See, a small paragraph, these big paragraphs.
No more meat bingo signs at the gazebo.
So toll booth, boot drive policy. So,
The only thing I thought on that one was, I thought that we had intended to put some language so that the donations had to be used locally.
Yeah.
And I didn't see it in the policy, and I don't know exactly how we'd word it anyway. It's not, it's like.
you basically say that substantially all of the funds raised will be used to serve people in Lunenburg. Something like that.
So I would think that we would want to add that, because it is inconvenient, toll booth fundraisers, and you wouldn't really want to have too many more of them. We already have like 3 groups, I think, that do toll booth fundraisers. And it's, I certainly stand out there with a bucket. I'm not saying that I'm opposed to them, but
Now,
I think I did think that was a good suggestion, that we want the money to be used locally.
do the firemen still do the muscular dystrophy one?
I don't
And
think
they always
so.
did that when I was a kid. I don't know if
I
that
don't
was
think
still
Lunenburg
okay.
does. Fitchburg
No,
does.
I think.
Okay.
I
I'm
think-
just wondering if there's any examples where you would prohibit something that already happens that technically doesn't just occur in Lunenburg, but maybe it's a little bit more.
Well, we do, the Salvation Army does one, and it's the local community in the area. I think, does the Lions Club do them? I think so.
They have
Maybe
done-
the
they
Boys
have
and
done,
Girls
yeah,
Club does
yeah,
them.
The
so.
skateboard, yeah, that type of thing, so. I think the theory was that you say substantially all, you don't want to say 100%, because there may be some overhead of the funds raised
Will be used locally.
serves the people in Lunenburg. Because if you serve the people in Lunenburg, it may not be physically served here, but as long as you're serving the people is what you tend to do. The other thing I was getting at this point is that I know that people use this as a way to publicize it. Do we have to approve each time, if they meet the requirements, could the town manager issue the permit? This doesn't happen that often. It doesn't hurt for people to come before us. I was just thinking procedurally.
Yeah, right, they probably like to be, come before us to advertise it.
It's a good opportunity to see it. Disturbances of newly paved roads. So this was a policy that we adopted 6 months ago,
Yeah.
No, it
Like
was
a
last
few
year.
of it was, I think it was the second to last date on the revision
Okay.
page.
So this was the most recent notice.
The
What we-
only thing that is not in here is, I know that we had determined that there would be a log kept by the DPW documenting the number of requests to disturb newly paved roads, and that there would be included the requests that were granted and why they were granted, and the requests that were denied and why they were denied. And I know that we voted and approved that, and I don't think we've seen a report. And it's, what are we, 2 years into it?
No, just this,
The
Aren't we at least in our second year?
no, 1 year.
It's 1 year.
Yeah.
The issue happened 2 years ago, but we never got the final policy until within the last year.
Oh, okay.
And then this one, I think, is maybe appropriate to split the policy from the procedure. Because the policy is that we don't want to disturb roads. How we do it is the procedure, that we need to have that procedure, and I'm fine with the reporting. The question becomes, what do we do with that report?
Well, it lets us know if the roads are being disturbed, or if we've done a good job of making sure everyone is aware that they can't be disturbed. How many have we
People have
granted, how
applied.
many have we denied?
Katie, you had a question?
Well, I had something milling about, it was back in May.
Did you just say milling?
Yes.
Mill Road?
No, that's, yeah. That's what happens in my brain all the time. this policy as it relates to when somebody wants to disturb or has to disturb. I feel like there can be certain circumstances, and there was one that was up for debate, and I think that it could happen again, that somebody may want to disturb a road because they want to access the gas. But you may have to disturb a road if there's a water main break,
And the,
because that's an
Agree.
emergency.
Yeah, I think there should be an emergency
So
provision.
after I read through all those emails, I kept thinking, I want to disturb it and I have to disturb it. And then once you have to disturb it, how does the town work as a partner with, like, say, the water department, who had to dig? I mean, it was something that got into my mind.
it's
terms of-
in the negative side. It can be
Yeah,
denied if
under
pavement.
exemptions it's listed.
I think that the bigger issue there was the method of repair.
The follow-up, it went into yes. Yeah.
Well, in the negative, E says may deny a permit if the DPW director determines pavement disruption is unnecessary to rectify an unsafe condition. So therefore, he is going to approve it if the disruption is necessary to rectify an unsafe condition, a broken pipe. So you may need to turn it into a positive and just be very clear.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but there
I
may
mean-
not be time to even submit an application for a permit. I mean, if there's
Right.
an emergency repair, it's an emergency. It's done right away.
Right,
It's not,
right.
oh, let me fill out the, the form.
Yeah,
But has the DPW cleaned up or reconsidered the method of repair, specifically with the water department? Are they on the same page now, or
That's
do we need to
in,
modify
Was there a
the,
resolution?
in process, yeah.
Okay.
It's got to be resolved.
is resolved this, and someone's gonna bend, or we gotta change the language?
I think there has to be a compromise with the language about emergency provisions.
The emergency.
Mhm.
At the same time, we don't want to have roads, regardless of whether it's just recently done or not. This relates to newly disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a standard that we have for newly paved, not newly paved road that somebody digs it up? There should be a standard for how you repair that too, rather than
Right,
that type of thing.
right, even if
So-
it's 6 years old.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, so that's still a pending. You've got the thing about the emergency part, you're going to talk about that.
In an emergency, I think then it's like trying to define who caused the need for the dig and not who did the digging.
The other thing in there, it's a typo, it says a violation of these construction.
What section or what letter?
It's in that section still.
Did I see it? Oh, yeah, severability clause. It says, which is on page 96 electronically, 92 paper. Severability, it says any paragraph or word of these regulations. It's not a regulation, so. And then this policy was adopted by the selectmen at their meeting.
We don't need
We don't
that
need
either.
that type of
Mhm.
thing. when we-
There you go, there's the date.
Yeah, that's right, it was last September. So, okay, Boston Post Kane. Policy. Might be good to actually put in why we do it. Oldest resident. Might be good to pull out that paragraph that, what is the Boston Post Kane, just to have it in here. Then personnel, I think we've determined that just about all those, Family Leave Act,
Don't belong here.
sexual harassment. Sexual harassment may need to be here.
It does.
That one's got to be the
Mhm,
both.
That's in both places.
Yeah. Complaints. Protected class harassment, that's got to be both. Alcohol and drug policy for employees with commercial driver's license. We don't have any elected officials doing it as elected or appointed officials, so that's personnel.
There is one change to that one, though.
Adding in opioids.
Yes.
And the question I have is, when marijuana becomes publicly accessible. Is there any discussion about,
For CDL drivers?
Yeah.
No, it would still be
even
prohibited.
if they're
Yeah.
not under the influence? Okay. I assume that was a state thing. Compensatory time, equal opportunity is both. Sick leave policy is personnel, contractors, procurement. That may go into the procurement section.
Yeah, you would think so.
Which would still be our policy, but just under procurement.
Right.
Town communications, oh, that's sort of a repeat of what we had before as far as the electronic, so that's a duplicate. Social media policy, we said we're going to come back and look at that.
I did put in some language regarding that paragraph we discussed.
Page 116, paper, 120, electronic. While employees maintain and use personal web pages and websites, blogs, microblogs, social networking sites, and other forms of social media while off-duty, their status as employees of the town requires that the content of any postings on those social medias or other web pages not be in violation of existing town bylaws, policies, directors, rules, or regulations. The town's image as a professional organization comprised of professional employees is critical to maintaining its respect to its constituents. Although the town recognizes that employees may choose to express themselves by posting personal information upon electronic media sites through all those various places, this right of expression is not free from limitation. That is, while the town acknowledges its employees have First Amendment right of free speech, that right is not absolute and extends only to matters of public concern. The term public concern is a legal one, but generally refers to matters of concern to the community rather than the individual. Employees must exercise caution with respect to comments they post in general, and in particular those concerning the town, a particular department of the town, and/or the town's employees. So that would be employees as opposed to, that would theoretically also apply to appointed officials as well. So are we going to, we really should have one policy that says, clarifies who's an employee.
Good definition section.
Yeah,
And would we be considering employees?
we would be,
Would appointed board members be?
yeah.
So elected and appointed members are all employees?
They are for open meeting law,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
so that would,
So then,
the question becomes for elected officials enforcing the policy. This goes back to what we had as the first discussion up above, where we're telling you you should behave like an adult. This is a special, you should behave like an adult
yeah, right.
one, but we want to have it as a standard for elected officials too, so that it's a message.
So does it belong in the policy?
Well, I think it belongs in the policy, but we may need to have a policy that goes in the personnel one that says employees, and we may need to change the language here and change it to town elected and appointed officials, as opposed to having employees be, because I think a lot of times an appointed person doesn't think of themselves as an employee.
So maybe you put in parentheses, including elected and appointed officials.
I think that'd be something that, Adam probably has other towns that have done employee and non-employee type policies that might be good to just,
But if it's the exact same policy, you don't need to separate it.
so we'll come back and have that discussion on that. Quarry policy, that probably can go under, yeah, because we don't do quarries
Kind of a
of,
procedure, right?
we don't do quarries of appointed.
Trying to think of an instance.
You could. Well, not appointed, I'm thinking elected.
Yeah, elected
Sorry.
you couldn't, unless they chose to volunteer. Because even like school committee members do they get quoried?
They must.
Not as an elected
I'm not
official.
sure if you could require.
Oh.
Well, like a scumbag if you want to.
That's right,
All right,
that's right.
let's.
Yeah, so that'll get moved to employee side. Parental leave, employee side. Domestic violence leave, employee side. Workplace violence. That probably needs to be both. Because we don't want,
Feels like it should apply to us as well.
yeah. Drug-free workplace. That should be both sides. America's with Disability Policy.
Yeah,
That's, yeah,
both.
that's both. Conflict of interest,
Both.
both. Standards of conduct, both. Oh, use of information technology resources, again.
This is
The third-
definitely employee. This
Okay.
is the employee version
Employee
of that
version.
policy.
Okay, all right, I see. All right.
But I think the only difference is under the bulletin boards for some reason.
Okay.
Oh, hold on, it says it was adopted 9/5/2018.
Yes. Yep.
Pregnant Workers Fairness Act policy. So that goes on an employee.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't expect to do it, but first pass through our policies. So the question I have.
It's only my third reading in 2 days.
You'll be the resident expert. I didn't pay attention to some of these before. Some of it was new to me. So apparently we didn't focus on those the last time we did a big review. So this was very helpful to me.
So it is, sorry, 2018,
Yep.
and something was adopted
Oh,
September 5th,
sorry, there should be,
Oh.
I just, I'm like,
17.
is it 2019? I didn't realize it.
So the other thing I would ask people to do.
Sorry, I had to stop for a minute and be like,
This is
okay.
good. Well, especially when we're going to be working on fiscal 19
Okay,
budget.
sorry. Yep.
So you're always in
That
different
is-
years.
It is
Correct.
2018, right? And we're not there yet.
I would ask
Yeah,
people to go look at
17.
other
Sorry.
town
Confused.
policies, other towns' policies, to see what's not in our policy. We've put policies in reaction to something, either we had to do it, or it was something we needed to address, or other stuff like that. Other towns, MMA is really good on sharing different resources. Just read other selectmen's policies, see what they have. Gee, should we do that? And then just bring that up to a future policy discussion.
And I think one of the biggest improvements is having a communication section where everything's in one place.
Yep.
And, because that was
Yep.
woven through this.
Yep.
Yeah, you have it better organized.
Yeah.
Yep.
Would help a lot.
Anything else on
I think
policies?
that there's a lot of redundancy too, so it'll be a lot shorter.
Well, I
we
think,
hope.
right, you think about, I'm just guessing, like 40 pages or so was employee information that's just going to exit this. So next year it'll.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
I can read it 4 times.
there were 2 other draft policies in your
Oh, right.
Google Drive.
Yep.
But we can save that for,
Well, it's just
those were on
raised
the, one of them was on the action item list, the flag policy.
light policy.
Straightforward,
Except I think
I had one comment too. You go
Oh,
with
go.
yours first.
Oh, well, the 2, I don't like double negatives. I think you could just say, the U.S. flag will be lowered as, the U.S. flag may be lowered by declaration of the Board of Selectmen.
Yep, turn it into a positive. So the purpose of the policy is to establish uniform guidelines for the lowering of the United States flag to half-staff flown over municipality. The United States flag is flown at town buildings and cemeteries will be flown at half-staff according to the federal and state mandates, make it plural. The United States flag will be lowered for other purposes by declaration by the Board of Selectmen. Town facility staff will monitor compliance with this policy. The town buildings and the cemetery superintendent will monitor the policy at town cemeteries. I think that's good. And then the other policy was Chapter
long.
61, Chapter 61B, first refusal procedure. So if it's a procedure, we don't have to
Okay.
adopt it.
All right,
It's, because it's not a policy.
Yeah.
If we had the land use committee has a policy that they will review land at that time, so they don't, so we might want to adopt that as a policy, and then this is the procedure.
The procedure is very verbose. I think they could clean that up a lot.
Some of it was there because a lot of people who submit it to us don't do it correctly, so they have to do it again. But this really is step by step by step, so, okay. Anything else?
Not today.
So, we have old business, selectmen goals. Was there anything for tonight? I don't think there was. Okay, any public comment from the public? No public? Any public comment for the board?
I think this was a great working session. I appreciate everyone's input.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Learning experience for me. I really appreciate. Sometimes you actually have to read it, even though we didn't read every word, but just say,
Yeah, right.
what does that really mean? So, any other public comment by board? Okay. Upcoming meetings, July 24th, August 7th, August 14th. Just note that August 1st is Lunenburg's 290th anniversary.
Oh.
300th anniversary of settling, but I've not found when we actually were settled. But it was 1718, so that's 300 years ago.
Time to create a committee.
That's right, we should be talking about doing a committee, because for the 250th, they had a committee established 5 years in advance. So, we'll start thinking the appropriate ways to celebrate our 300th anniversary.
It's in 5 years?
10 years.
10 years.
So we can spend,
You have 5
we can
years
spend
to
5
form
years to form our
5 years to
committee.
get, so we could start searching out for people who fill out a talent bank application for that. I'll apply in 5 years.
The littlest things, when they celebrated in the past, you know, you see the big buntings and everything look, and even just seeing the buntings this year on Town Hall,
Yeah.
these little tiny things, I think, make a big difference, and the best pictures are when they're celebrating their birthday, but I was really happy to see a little, I don't know, just a little decor this year. It looked really nice.
And the additional flags up and down the streets, too. Accept a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank